I want you to try something. Picture an apple, a red one, sitting on a white surface. Take a second and really see it. The shine on the skin, the slight imperfections, maybe a small dent near the stem. Got it? For most people, something just happened in their mind. Not perfectly, not like a photograph, but something. A rough image. A sense of redness. A shape. For somewhere between 1 and 4% of the population, that instruction produced absolutely nothing. Not a dim outline, not a vague impression, nothing, a blank. Like trying to watch a movie on a screen that isn't there. And here's the part that makes this genuinely fascinating. Most of those people had no idea this wasn't normal. They'd spent their entire lives hearing phrases like, "picture this," or "imagine that," and assumed everyone was speaking metaphorically. The same way you might say, "I see what you mean," without literally seeing anything. They didn't know there was a screen. They just thought everyone else was also sitting in the dark. This condition has a name. It's called aphantasia. And the story of how we discovered it, what it tells us about how differently human minds are actually built, and what happens to memory, creativity, and dreams when your mind's eye simply doesn't work, is even more fascinating. When you visualize something, what's actually happening inside your brain is stranger than it sounds. Your visual cortex, the region at the back of your skull responsible for processing what your eyes send it, doesn't only activate when you're looking at things, it also activates when you're imagining them. When you picture that apple, your brain is doing something surprisingly close to actually seeing one. Not identically, but the same machinery is running. The same regions are firing. Think of it this way. Your brain is essentially a prediction engine that's constantly generating a model of the world. When light hits your retina, it updates the model, but the model can also run without that input. Mental imagery is your brain rendering its own internal simulation. No external signal required. This is why mental visualization is so useful. Athletes who mentally rehearse a movement activate the same motor pathways as athletes who physically practice it. Meditators can induce calm by visualizing peaceful scenes because the brain responds to the image almost as if it were real. Therapists use visualization to help patients process fear, because picturing something threatening activates a genuine threat response, one you can then learn to regulate. Mental imagery isn't decoration, it's infrastructure, which makes it all the more striking that for some people that infrastructure simply isn't there. The story of how aphantasia was formally identified starts with a single patient. In 2010, a man came to neurologist Adam Zeman at the University of Exeter with an unusual complaint. Following a minor cardiac procedure, he had completely lost the ability to visualize. He could still think abstractly, still remember facts, still function normally, but his mind's eye had gone dark. No images at all. Zeman published a case study in 2010. And then, something unexpected happened. People started writing to him, not because they'd had a cardiac procedure, but because they had never been able to visualize their entire lives, and they had just read the first clinical description of their own experience. In 2015, Zeman published a follow-up paper and gave the condition its name, aphantasia, from the Greek aphantasia, meaning an absence of imagination. The paper described 21 people who had contacted him. By the time the study went public, thousands more reached out. They weren't broken. They weren't rare medical cases. They were just people whose minds worked differently and who had never had language for it. When researchers began asking aphantasics what they experience instead of images, the answers were consistent and illuminating. Most describe thinking in concepts rather than pictures. They know what an apple is in color, shape, texture, all of it. They just don't see it. It's knowledge without imagery, understanding without visualization. Some describe it as thinking in words or in abstract spatial senses. Others say they can navigate the layout of their childhood home perfectly without ever being able to picture it. The information is there. The rendering engine just isn't running. Here's something the headlines about aphantasia tend to skip over. This isn't binary. Mental imagery doesn't simply exist or not exist. It exists on a spectrum. Researchers measure it using something called the Vividness of Visual Imagery Questionnaire, a simple self-report scale where you rate how clearly you can picture a series of scenes. The results reveal an enormous range in how vividly people actually visualize. At one end, you have aphantasia, no imagery, complete blank. At the other end, there's something called hyperphantasia, people whose mental imagery is so vivid, so detailed, and so involuntary that it approaches the intensity of actually seeing something. Some hyperphantasics describe difficulty distinguishing between a very strong mental image and a real perception. Their internal rendering engine runs at full resolution all the time, whether they want it to or not. Most people fall somewhere in the middle. Vague, impressionistic imagery that's useful but not overwhelming. And almost nobody talks about this. We go through our entire lives sharing experiences with other people, using the same words for completely different internal realities. When a hyperphantasic and an aphantasic both say they're imagining something, they are having experiences so different from each other that calling them the same thing is almost misleading. Close your eyes for a moment and try to picture someone you love. Notice whatever comes up or doesn't. That experience, that level of vividness or blankness, is not universal. Somewhere right now, someone else doing the same thing is having a completely different inner experience than you, and they've always assumed you are having the same one. If you can't visualize, what happens to the rest of your mental life? Memory turns out to be significantly affected. Research from Adam Zeman's group found that people with aphantasia tend to have weaker autobiographical memory, fewer vivid recollections of personal experiences, which makes a certain intuitive sense. If memory is partly reconstructed through mental imagery, the way we discussed in our last video, then removing the imagery might reduce the richness of what gets retrieved. Aphantasics also report less intense emotional responses to recalled memories. Not no emotion, but a flattening. The memory is there, but it can't play back in a way that brings the feeling fully online. Some describe knowing something was an important moment without being able to feel why. Dreams are interesting too. Many aphantasics report that they do dream in images. Their visual cortex can apparently run that simulation during sleep, even when it won't cooperate while awake. Others report dreamless or purely conceptual sleep. The research here is still developing, but here's the twist that catches most people off guard. Several highly successful creative people have publicly identified as aphantasic. Blake Ross, one of the co-creators of Firefox, wrote a widely read post about discovering aphantasia in his 30s and realizing with genuine shock that other people could actually see things in their minds. Ed Catmull, the co-founder of Pixar, a studio built entirely on visual imagination, has aphantasia. Craig Venter, one of the scientists behind mapping the human genome. These aren't people who are blocked creatively by the absence of mental imagery. They've found different routes to the same destination. Aphantasics often develop exceptional verbal reasoning, abstract thinking, and conceptual creativity. The mind, as it turns out, is remarkably good at routing around what it doesn't have. Here's what I keep coming back to with aphantasia. It wasn't discovered because something went wrong. It was discovered because one man lost something he used to have, and researchers started asking questions they had never thought to ask before. And what those questions uncovered wasn't a disorder hidden in a small corner of the population. It was evidence that the most basic aspects of inner experience, what it's like to think, to remember, to imagine, vary between people in ways we had never even tried to measure. We assume other minds work like ours. It's the most natural assumption in the world. How else would you even know to question it? But the mind's eye is not standard equipment. Some people are running high-definition simulations. Some are working entirely in the dark. Most are somewhere in between, comparing nothing, assuming everything. If you've never been able to visualize and you're only now putting a name to it, you're not broken. You're just running different software. And if you can visualize clearly, and this entire video felt obvious because of course you can picture an apple, find someone in your life and ask them what they actually see when they close their eyes. You might be surprised how different the answer is.